Despite the stereotypes about writers, writing is not a solitary venture. The very fact that you're listening to me right now proves that. We writers thrive in creative communities. Every writer that we interact with offers us new perspectives, often in unexpected ways. And cultivating a community of writers, no matter its shape or composition, is a vital way to maintain your creative energy and to help your creations reach their highest potential. But how do you find communities like this, and how can you make your own? And why should we connect with other writers in the first place, beyond what I've already mentioned? So today, we explore the importance of finding your writer's community. Welcome back to WordSea, guidance for writers new and veteran. So firstly, I want to try to define just what a writer's community is. And the short answer is, it's a collection of people who like writing and like reading and offering feedback on writing. That's it. A writer's community can be any size. It can be you and two close friends or family members. Your community could also be a Facebook, Twitter, or Discord group of 30 plus people, or a creative writing class, or a club. Actually, you could technically be in all these communities at once. Now, I've been in over a dozen college or grad level writing workshops in my time, and each one was a writer's community. But I've also taught a number of creative writing classes, and each one was also a community. After all, even though I was the one teaching, I was learning just as much. However, I also maintain a consistent group of about maybe 4 or 5 close friends who all offer me a unique, valuable dimension of writing feedback. So don't be afraid to be in multiple communities at once. Each one can have weaknesses that other communities' strengths can help fill in. To illustrate just how unique each writer's community can be, I have a little story. So at the time of recording this lesson, I've been working on a fantasy novel series for about 5 years or so. Now, I admit I often struggle with writing first chapters. So I'd taken the first chapter of this novel to a grad school writing workshop, and it got its usual rundown of pluses and minuses, but I wasn't quite satisfied, so I turned to my close friend, a fellow grad student, and I handed him my first chapter, and I let him know that I was still kind of feeling a little off about it. So about 2 days later, he comes to me, and I'll never forget this for as long as I live, but he hands me back my first chapter and says, and pardon the language, "This is shit." And it was. It really actually was. And I feel like I'd known that it was, and I feel like the writing workshop had also known that it was, but everyone was just being too polite about it. But after hearing such sort of frank and uncompromising feedback from somebody who I really trusted, that really jolted me into action. And I can safely say now, having given that friend a much revised version of that first chapter, that chapter is no longer, well, so lacking in quality. Everybody's writing community will look different because every writer is different. But no matter what form your community takes, there's one element that I think should remain consistent. And that's that writing communities should adhere to the principles of what Dr. Kenneth Cook at Iowa State University calls the gift community, which I'll lay out for you now. Now, full disclosure here, Dr. Cook was, and at the time of recording this still is, a professor and advisor of mine at Iowa State University. However, this means that I've seen the efficacy of his theories firsthand, and I've taught all of my creative writing workshops by applying his theories on the gift community, and theories of workshopping pieces, which we'll also see in the next lesson. And so I'll be the first one to go to bat for their usefulness. But with that out of the way, let's dig in. In his book, The Art of Disobedience, Cook advocates a writing critique to be what he calls text-centric rather than responder-centric, as it's likely that most or even all of the members of your writing community will know you in some personal way. Avoiding responder-centric feedback is vital. And Cook defines responder-centric feedback as being, quote, deeply rooted in the responder's preferences and prejudices, unquote. He goes on to say that such feedback isn't rooted in a real earnest attempt to engage with a story, to understand and appreciate it as a piece of art. Instead, it's more rooted in the person who's actually doing the writing. So the responder is focusing on the author's strengths and weaknesses rather than the strengths and weaknesses of the piece itself. Meanwhile, text-centric writing critiques try to ask questions of the piece. They ask what the piece is trying to achieve, and they ask how well it's succeeding at this vision, and it asks where the piece is maybe at odds with itself, or maybe not quite pushing the envelope far enough, or perhaps pushing it too far in some places, and maybe not living up to its full potential. With text-centric feedback, personal connection to the author is removed from the equation. Now, how does all this talk about feedback fit into the so-called GIF community? Well, as Cook puts it, text-centric critiques are generous in nature. By engaging with a piece of writing so deeply as to treat it like a piece of legit literature with praiseworthy creative intentions, you're giving a gift to the author. You're giving them the gift of your unbiased, high-effort, high-payoff feedback. Not only that, but Cook even argues that by practicing your critical articulation skills via text-centric feedback, that you're even giving a gift to yourself. I like to think of this text-centric workshop process as something like training your palate if you were a chef. Tasting and describing in exhaustive detail the taste of food can really open your eyes or your taste buds when you go back into the kitchen yourself. And like we described in our lesson on writer's block, by becoming a more critical and engaged reader, you become a more critical and engaged writer. You're sort of pulling off the face of the clock to better understand all the ticking machinery going on within. To summarize, the GIF community is a state you should try to get your writing community to emulate. Engage with each other's works with, as Cook puts it, generosity. Cultivate a community of writers who will treat your writing as if it were a piece of literature that is worthy of rigorous critical attention and evaluation, no matter how rough and in progress it might still be. And also, cultivate your own habits of critique so that you can return the gifts to your fellow writers. Now I'd like to turn a lot of attention to what Roy Peter Clark has to say about building a writing community in his Writing Tools book. In his chapter, Recruit Your Own Support Group, Clark emphasizes that it's important for you to create a system of support that is, quote, both wide and deep. He suggests against limiting yourself to classroom workshops or singular teachers, and he encourages finding those whom you can trust and those who bring a wide variety of skills and outlooks to your work. He then goes on to extensively lay out 6 different categories of people he relies on for his own writing community. First is the writer who keeps me going. This is somebody who plays cheerleader, encouraging you to keep writing. They may not even often look at your work in an editorial way, but their support is no less vital. Second is a helper who understands my idiosyncrasies. This is somebody who understands your reservations about your own work, say in anxiety, in character building, or in voice. They know where you think you have weaknesses and know best how to address them. Third is a helper willing to answer my questions. Recall how important questioning is to the idea of treating people's works like pieces of literature in the GIF community. Find somebody who you can pose questions to and receive trustworthy answers, even if those answers might be brutally honest. Fourth is an expert helper to match my topic. This is what it says on the tin. Depending on the kind of work you're writing, seek somebody out who's an expert at it. This could mean a specialist in a genre, or style, or form of writing, or perhaps somebody who's always just had really crackerjack craft, dialogue, scene setting, and the like. Fifth is a helper who runs interference. It helps to have somebody who knows how to best encourage your creative habits. This might mean some tough love, such as saying no when you ask them to hang out one day because they know that you're just procrastinating and putting off writing. Sixth, and finally, is a coach who helps you figure out what works and what needs work. Clark emphasizes how this coach was actually somebody much younger than him with an entirely different skill set. So this coach is a position of prestige and great trust. It's somebody you should feel comfortable sharing virtually any of your pieces, no matter how refined or raw they are, with. Clark concludes his chapter by reminding us to feel free to compare our helpers against one another. Show your piece to 3 different people and compare their feedback, while considering that each person may be bringing a different skill set or be playing different roles. I also want to note that none of Clark's advice is at odds with Cook's. Just because somebody in your writing community knows you well doesn't mean that they can't give you that text-centric feedback necessary for maintaining the GIF community. In fact, just like my little story I shared earlier, they may just be the right person to phrase the feedback you need in just the right way that only they would know because they know you well. I really want to emphasize that assembling, building, maintaining, and refreshing your writers community is a joy. You'll come to really rely on those in your community and they on you, and no matter where you go or what you're writing, you'll always have people you can trust to stand by your side, rooting for you, and you'll root for them just as loudly. But once you've got your writers community, what can and should your text-centric feedback look like? How do you give and receive strong feedback? And then, just as importantly, how do you process that feedback and begin the editing process while remaining true to your own creative vision? Next lesson, to wrap up our first unit, we'll be discussing all that and more. I wish you all the best as you navigate the wide open WordSea and experience the wonder of writing. See you next time.